Para mí es un gusto
my
poder estar
friends.
nuevamente con ustedes y
For me,
poder
it's an honor that
compartir
can be here today
reflexiones
once
en
again
relación a
with
lo que
you
se
and
conoce como
share a
buen
few
vivir.
reflections
En
about
el
the
día de
Buen Vivir,
ayer les
the
dije
good
que
life.
lamentablemente
And
no voy a hacer
yesterday I
mi presentación
already
en alemán,
talked about it,
sino que la haré
that
directamente en
I
español.
will not give my presentation in German, but in
Agradeciendo la invitación y
Spanish.
agradeciendo tus generosas palabras, Heike,
So I
empiezo
also like to
retomando lo que
thank
para mí podría
Heike for
ser
her warm
el
words,
mensaje central de
and
la
I'd like
tan
to
interesante, tan potente presentación
start with
que
the
escuchamos el día de ayer
central
de
message
Aram Said.
and
La
continue working
promesa de la
on the
modernidad, no
message
la
of Aram
promesa del
Said that
desarrollo.
he
La
mentioned
promesa de la
yesterday,
modernidad
the promise of
no tiene ningún fundamento
modernity,
más.
not the
Es
promise
muy
of development,
importante
but of
entender
modernity.
que a pesar
There's
de
no
que hemos
fundament
acumulado
for that.
como seres
There's no
humanos
foundation
una
for that.
gran
It's very
cantidad de
important for us to
conocimiento,
understand that despite
tenemos
the
a
fact that
nuestro
we
haber
as
avances
humans have
tecnológicos
gathered quite a lot of
increíbles.
knowledge,
Podemos hacer una serie de
we have made
transformaciones en
massive
ese ámbito que
technological
hace pocas
progress.
décadas
We
resultaban imposibles
changed
de
within
creer.
just a few
Inclusive,
decades.
esta
Back in the day,
reunión
we
virtual
thought that
demuestra de la
simply
capacidad
wouldn't be possible,
tecnológica
but
de
we
la
managed
humanidad.
that. We achieved
El poder ha aumentado.
things, and this digital
Tenemos, como puedo
conference also
señalar, enormes
to
recursos
show
acumulados,
what humans
pero
can
no hemos
achieve
resuelto
and
los
what humans
problemas
can do.
más
We've got many
elementales de la humanidad,
resources, but still
como
we
acabar con el hambre,
don't
acabar
have
con la
the
enfermedad, asegurar una
solve the basic
educación
problems
adecuada para todos
of
los seres humanos, vivienda y sobre todo
mankind.
una vida digna. Y todos esos
Ending
esfuerzos,
hunger,
esos entre comillas,
providing
logros
access to
conseguidos, los hemos realizado
a dignified
destrozando
life and
los
education.
equilibrios
All these things we've
ambientales. Creo que esto es
by
fundamental, que tenemos
destroying
que hacer
nature,
nuevamente
and this, I think
lecturas
that's
más
really
apropiadas para
fundamental.
entender lo que está pasando.
We
Con
have
toda
to
razón,
create
vemos
something
cómo
better,
ahora el
create
coronavirus, que
something,
no es la causa de los
build something
problemas, pero
better.
que sí los ahonda,
We just see how
es un tema que nos preocupa
coronavirus is not
sobremanera.
the
El número de personas
root of
fallecidas
our
por el
problems, but
coronavirus
it
y que seguirá
exacerbates
subiendo
the
ya debe
situation. We can
estar
see
a
how
nivel
many people
mundial
died
cerca de 3
from
millones.
corona. I
Me
think the
parece que
number
es un
still
número que debe
rising.
hacernos a
I think
nosotros
about 3
reflexionar,
million people
no
died
solo
from
por la
corona
necesidad de encontrar
worldwide,
una
and that's the number
respuesta
that
con un
should
sistema de
really make us
vacunación
think we should
gratuita como un
find a
derecho y no
solution
como una
with a
mercancía y
vaccination
no como un
system
privilegio para
that's
toda la
for free.
humanidad,
That's not a
sino que esto
privilege.
nos debe hacer a
That's not a
nosotros
market, but
comprender en qué
provides
momento
access
está
for
viviendo la
everyone.
humanidad. Y tenemos, digo
That
yo, que
we should
aprender a hacer
make
mejores
sure that
lecturas.
we know
Estamos
what kind of
preocupados
moment
y
we
con toda
are
razón por
living
la
that
cantidad
we're
de personas que
experiencing as
fallecen por el coronavirus,
mankind.
por la tragedia que eso representa.
We're
Pero nos hemos
currently
preocupado de
quite
igual manera
worried about
por
the
la
number of
cantidad de
people who have
personas
died,
que día a día
but
fallecen por desnutrición o hambre.
we
Según
might not worry
informaciones
as
que he
much
obtenido, al día
about
mueren
the people who die every
26,000
day from
personas
hunger,
por
from poverty.
desnutrición o por
And I read that
hambre.
about
10 millones de personas en
26,000
el
people
planeta. Y no
die
es
from
un
hunger
tema
every
de
single
falta de
day.
alimentos.
That's
Producimos
really
alimentos
not
para
that
10,000
it's
millones de
not
personas.
the thing
Vivimos en el
that
planeta
there's not enough
7.600
food.
millones
We
de
do have
personas a
enough
la
food for
actualidad.
everyone.
Y día a día se van
Currently,
a su casa con hambre.
we
Cerca de
have
1.000 millones de
enough
personas.
food for
Y esto ha
everyone, for
subido
all
en
the people in
medio
the
del
world, but
coronavirus, en
still
medio de la
hundreds,
pandemia del
thousands
coronavirus,
of people
sobre
go
todo con
home
las políticas
hungry.
que se han puesto en
And
marcha,
during
que
this
han tendido a
pandemic,
buscar
during
la
this virus,
normalidad
it just
responsable
got
de las
even worse,
anormalidades
even
que
the
podríamos
policy that
seguir
was
mencionando.
created.
Otro tema que me llama muy
We could talk about
poderosamente la
this for
atención,
much longer.
la
Another
situación
topic that I'm also
creciente
very
de contaminación en las
interested in is the
ciudades. 8
situation
millones de
of
personas
the resuelven esa posibilidad. Well-being for everyone, but all this material progress
crece la economía, pero no aumenta la felicidad.
won't get us
Eso se
there.
ha medido
It's
como
quite
para
paradoxical,
países como
to be honest.
Alemania,
Our
Japón,
economy
los
is
Estados Unidos y
increasing,
para
but
casi
our
todos los países
happiness
ricos.
is increasing. You
El
can see
crecimiento
that
per
in
cápita de
Germany,
la
in
economía
Japan,
ha sido
USA, in almost
creciente en las
all
últimas
of the
décadas,
rich
5 o 6
countries.
décadas,
the economy has been growing in the past 5 decades, but the happiness indicator either remains the same or is decreasing, or the reason is rising. The number of expenses for maintenance is increasing in a way that simply is necessary at all. We should really start not just talk about development, but bad development, a system that there are badly developed countries, rich and poor countries who are badly developed. So we have to find alternatives. It's really great that my friend Ashish Kotari also took part in this conference. And we're working together for 5 years. We've worked together on Pluriverse for 5 years. And Adam Saini also mentioned him quite a few times.
Federico de Maria de Italia.
Federico de Maria from Italy. I took part in this book as well. And this book showed Arish Kotari also promoted this book in English. I will promote it in Spanish. Pluriverse. It's a dictionary for the post-development. It's a book that can be bought in many countries, in English as well, and it will soon be published in Italian and in Portuguese as well. In German, we have not managed to get enough funding to have it translated into German, but I hope we'll manage to do so, Heike. I think there's so many alternatives. They're not just one alternative, there are many alternatives. And amongst these alternatives, we can find important elements to think differently about the world, to create different worlds. We also call this Pluriverse. So Pluriverse, the Buen Vivir in Ecuador, that's how we call it, and it's a great idea to see the world from different angles, but at the same time creating options and to have different social relationships. I'm sorry that I have to interrupt you for a second, but it seems as if you are on your screen. You switched on the translation. Can you switch it off so that we can all hear you? Okay, it says that it's switched off. Have you switched on the interpreting mode? Yes, it says that the interpreting mode is switched off. Okay, so that might not be a problem of yours. Sorry that I interrupted you. Can I go on?
Okay.
So what I said is the following. Buen Vivir is something that allows us to perceive reality in a different way. And that's something that's a very important, very strong element that we can contemplate how to find different structures of organization for people. Together with nature, and in this way I just like to describe and explain some elements of Buen Vivir, what kind of concept that actually is. But it's not just an idea, it's just what we experience, what shapes Buen Vivir. We don't want to provide recipes and models for Buen Vivir. There are no models, there are no recipes, it's practices. There's also philosophy and theory in there. Experts, philosophists, and philosophers part of that. It's about modernity, but also about how to perceive reality.
que yo no soy un experto del buen vivir. Yo me considero un estudioso del buen vivir. Un experto del buen vivir debería ser o es una persona que vive en una comunidad donde se intenta al menos organizar las relaciones a partir de los principios básicos del buen vivir. Entonces, lo que nos interesa ahora es hacernos algunas preguntas. ¿De dónde surge el buen vivir? Primera pregunta. Y eso, sin lugar a dudas, surge desde el mundo indígena, desde el mundo de los pueblos originarios. Esos pueblos marginados, esos pueblos explotados, esos pueblos ignorados, lograron, y pienso en este caso concreto, en los pueblos de los Andes y de la Amazonía, resistir más de 500 años de conquista y colonización. Este es un punto fundamental. Son más de 500 años que los pueblos de esos han sido aplastados, dominados, olvidados muchas veces. Y lo que es peor, sus visiones de mundo han sido ignoradas o despreciadas, marginadas. Este es el punto fundamental. Esos pueblos con una larga memoria nos ofrecen oportunidades para entender cómo nos podríamos organizar de mejor manera, buscando relaciones que se sustenten en los equilibrios, en las armonías, en las reciprocidad, en la solidaridad. Entonces es importante hacer una puntualización. Buen vivir surge de palabras
important to name all of these things.
de idiomas
When we
indígenas. Del quichua se dice
comes
suma
from
causa,
the
otros
language
dirían,
from the
no es suma causa, es ali
suma
causa.
causa,
No
es
quiero
called in
entrar en
Quechua
esa
or the ali
discusión,
causa.
soy simplemente economista y ese es uno de los tantos problemas que tengo, que no solo de traducción,
in Quechua,
sino el problema de ser economista. Y además hay otras posibilidades, por ejemplo, los aymaras hablan del suma camaña.
Sometimes I struggle
En
that
guaraní se habla del ñandareco o teco porá, como dicen en Brasil. Podríamos ver el Cumemoquén de los mapuches en Chile. Y así podríamos ir viendo términos que representarían una traducción quizás forzada a lo que hoy llamamos buen vivir.
Same thing, they're basically a translation of this. Well, Buen Vivir actually is a translation of these words from indigenous languages, and this Buen Vivir
de valores, de
derives
experiencias
from
y de muchas
ideas,
prácticas existentes en las comunidades indígenas.
That
Dije
where
insisto,
they are
no hay un modelo
capitalized
del
and
buen
lived
vivir,
in
no debería haber
by
una
indigenous
teoría
people.
rígida
There is
del
no
buen vivir,
model. There
pero
is
sí
not
nos
supposed to be
permite
a
a
strict
nosotros
theory.
abrir la puerta a
There really
otras
shouldn't be a
formas de
strict theory,
pensar
but
y de
Buen Vivir,
sentir.
but just
No se
to
puede
enable us to
idealizar,
open doors,
sin
to
lugar a
think
dudas,
differently,
a
to
las
perceive
comunidades indígenas. No pueden
differently.
ser romantizadas.
You cannot
500 años de conquista y
idealize that. You
colonización
cannot
que no
idealize,
terminó cuando se fueron los europeos
romanticize
y continúa
indigenous
con
people.
gobiernos
There
neoliberales
were
o con
500
gobiernos
years of
progresistas. 500
conquest
años
by
que fueron
Europeans,
influenciados, con los que fueron
500 years
influenciados con los principios de la modernidad, el capitalismo de por medio.
of
Pero
influence
sin
on
embargo, a pesar de
indigenous
estar atrapados en esta lógica del
people,
consumismo, del productivismo,
modern
hay
times,
elementos
capitalism,
importantes
despite the fact
que
that they were
podemos aprender
caught
siempre y
in
cuando
this
no los
capitalism, but there are
banalicemos.
still elements that
Siempre y
we can learn
cuando
from them.
no
We really
utilicemos el buen
shouldn't
vivir
consider
como un
this as
dispositivo de poder.
banal.
Y si
We really
vamos a hablar de este
shouldn't
tema, necesariamente tengo
use
que plantear
Buen Vivir as a
la
power
lectura de
dispositive.
un libro que
When
recomiendo,
talking about this
escrito por
topic,
un
I
compatriota
have to mention a
amigo
book that
que vive en
I can
Alemania,
really
David
recommend that
Cortés,
was written by a
un
friend of
libro
mine, David
publicado
Cortés.
por la Flaxo, por la
He
Facultad
lives in Germany,
Latinoamericana de Ciencias Sociales de
and
Ecuador,
it's a book
en
that
este
was
año,
published in
que se
Ecuador by
titula
the
Suma Causa
university,
y Buen
and
Vivir,
it's called Suma
entre
Causa,
signos de interrogación,
which is Buen
dispositivos de
Vivir.
poder, ética ambiental y
It's also
gobierno
called
global. El libro está disponible a través de las
Ethic
redes
and
sociales, se puede adquirir en
Global
Flaxo y
Affairs.
recomiendo la lectura, porque ahí se
You
hace
can read
una
it
reflexión
in the
sobre
social
la
media about
emergencia
it. I
histórica
really
de
recommend
estas
this
ideas
book
del buen
because you
vivir,
think about
que
the
surgen
history,
a procesos de
of Buen
resistencia
Vivir,
a
the
la
ideas
conquista y
of Buen Vivir,
colonización, ya dos
who
veces antes
arose
mencionadas,
from
igualmente a los
resistance,
intentos de
against the
cooptación
conquest.
que ha habido por parte de
And
distintas otras fuerzas políticas y sociales. Por ejemplo, David habla de las
And
influencias
also,
de lo que sería, entre
David
comillas,
talks
la
about
paz
the
bíblica, la
influence
influencia de
of
organizaciones internacionales y también
biblical
los riesgos
peace
que ahí
and
aparecen cuando podrían surgir los comisarios políticos del buen vivir,
international
personas
corporations
que se
problem that
encargan
can
de mantener
occur,
la línea
problems that can
correcta
occur
de lo que
because
serían
of
estas
politics.
propuestas que emergen desde el mundo
So
indígena. Hay
we
muchas
have to
potencialidades people want to take the right path, there's a lot of potential, but there are problems as well. And in this context, I'd like to say that it's important to go back to the roots, that you can see modernity, but still the question is, Buen Vivir has another potential as well. The idea of Buen Vivir in living in harmony, that you can find that in many different other different places. I'd like to mention other countries as well. This talking about so I have to interrupt you. Yeah, I'm really sorry. There are people who are listening. I'd like to listen to the English version. Can you maybe get into the Spanish channel, please? So maybe it will work then. So I hope maybe we should check if that works. Can you hear me? Does it work now? Can everyone hear me who's listening to either the German or the English translation? Is it working? Is it better now? Fantastic. So I'll work on Tito. Tito, have you chosen both languages? Do both languages work? Yes. Fantastic. I'm sorry that I interrupted you. No worries. You're here for coordination and organization. So what I said, I was talking Mejano, or the Peruvian, who talked about indigenous people, about indigenous affairs in general, to understand the spaces a lot better. To understand indigenous people who are not just in South America and Latin America. Ashkotari also talked about this, what ecologists, a radical democracy that he talked about. There were also perspectives from Africa, Ubuntu, for instance. That's a really fantastic perspective for interhuman relationships. I exist because you exist, and you exist because I exist. It's also quite related to nature. There's such kind of visions in Japan. As Illich mentioned it yesterday, the Fabatistas. So we could go on and on. There's so many interesting lectures and books, and there's so many common points, not all the same, but they still allow us to create many alternatives. And there are many feminist movements who enrich us. We talk about decolonization, and also in this context, you might want to listen to Pope Franciscus. It's about anthropology, about things that are important, that you can listen to the world, to the poor, that listen to their voice. In Germany as well, there were a lot of things were tried out. Das gute Leben, as you would say in German, good life, is present in these places as well, not just in this conference in Cologne as well. For 6 or 7 years, there's the day of the Buen Vivir, so the day of good life is celebrated once a year. So I think about how you can change or reorganize the city. Of course, there's manipulation and perverted logics in Ecuador with progressive governments. They might have used Buen Vivir as kind of propaganda, just use this concept to keep modernizing this capitalism. And in Germany, 4 or 5 years ago, Ms. Merkel's government invited people to talk about Buen Vivir, and Ms. Merkel was asked why she wants to talk about Buen Vivir, and she said they want to talk about that so the German can stay the way it is, so that they keep doing what they do, and they use Buen Vivir to exercise power. But how can we really define Buen Vivir without getting stuck? I think Buen Vivir means that human people live in balance with each other, with nature. It's not just about individuals, but the individuals in context with other people in a community, and that means not just our community, because that could lead to some kind of positioning that's difficult, that we talk about our living space. That's a connotation that's really painful, especially in Germany, when you take a look at German history. So we have to see that there's a balance. We have to create a balance. All of the countries, all communities, all people need to be included. That would be a good vision of Buen Vivir. So that means living in harmony, in balance. The communities together with nature. We are nature. We cannot live without it. So this definition, or from this definition, I could pick 3 principles, which, so there's one sentence from Ecuador, from a leader from Ecuador, Macas. I have to look this sentence up. As you can see, I've got trouble as well. Oh, that it is. I will read it out. It's a sentence that's very important, that's very strong when it comes about this kind of reflection that enables us to go on, to continue what and to see what we're actually talking about. So Mr. Maka says, in this context, and he talks about Buen Vivir, and this concept, there's the concept of summa kasai, and we can say that's about the idea that that's the backbone of the common system. It's about the collective, about the cooperation, the coexistence of mankind, a coexistence with different elements, and it's about harmony between people, between the community of people and the other forms of existence that exist in nature with Mother Earth. So to say, life is possible, interaction is possible between all elements, all living elements, and that Luis Marcas said, that's what he said. He's a leader of indigenous people of the Salahuru in Ecuador. So this approach that Luis Marcas gives us is a definition that I used, where it's about, it shows that the individual, there's the individual, the community, and nature, and that society is important in life, and that individualism is also a terrible disease. The Ministry for Loneliness in Japan, for instance, in England, where it's just about people, the fact that the people are not poor, they're just lonely. And we have to meet the people. We have to think when it comes to our neighbors, there's still communities bases in many places of the world, and in other places you have to rebuild them. There's no recipe for that, but I think it's fundamental to think about that. And everywhere, also in rural areas, in cities, we have to meet again with our neighbors. We have to be sure of being a citizen civilian, it becomes more and more important when you take a look at the situation we're currently experiencing, especially with Corona, with lockdown. Overcoming coronavirus also means that we overcome the ideas of individualism, of consumerism. We really destroy the basis of nature, and there's so many things to think about what it means to make decisions of, for example, when it comes to indigenous people. We cannot romanticize them, as I mentioned before, but they do make decisions via consensus. They have long debates and discussions, of course, but that just creates more solidarity. Also in politics, you have to lead, but lead in a way by listening. That's very important. That's difficult. It's surely difficult in many governments. In economics, there's still room to keep for development. I could talk about this for hours, but we should really know how we come back to a cooperation, to working together. It's not about money. There are no bosses on top, but that you find solutions together. That you can see what's needed for a coexistence. Another institution, and they say that today it's today about me and tomorrow about you. It's not about time and money. It's about having some sort of camaraderie of giving and taking, and have other different kind of creating different kind of networks of life. I could mention other things, but I don't think we have enough time. But I want to talk about a second pillar of the Buen Vivir. It's about living together with nature, with Mother Nature. Mother Nature is not a metaphor for indigenous people. It's not about Mother Earth as something abstract, but for indigenous people, Mother Earth is something true, something real. It is the real mother of people, and for them, for people from the West, that's something very complex that I can't necessarily accept, but that's the fundamental thing. It's very interesting. It's about taking this vision of the indigenous people and accept it. They protect their mother just the way we would protect our own real biological mothers, that would take care of them. And the indigenous people protect Mother Earth in the exact same way. We need a protection of nature that is supported by visions, by economically friendly visions. And I think Pope Francesco of Assisi started it. Another Dutch philosopher talked about nature, about Mother Earth, and I'd like to invite all of you who are in Germany to read German, and the German who talked about sustainability, Hans Karl von Kalowitz. He published a book about economics in 1713, and he's got a message that is very strong. He talked about the fact that you have to protect the forest, that you have to protect biodiversity. He talked about rights, about basic rights for everyone, for the people, that you have to promote natural production. He opposed European powers getting stronger, and that there even more and more colonies were created. And these kind of people, you can learn so much from them. These kind of people, they stand up for Mother Earth's rights. They tell me that Mother Earth has rights. There's a lot to learn, there's a lot to see, and these visions start with really being projected to the world. We organize on all continents. We organize a trip tribunal since 2014, a tribunal for Mother Earth and the protection of it. It shows that there are rights of nature, and this has to go hand in hand with human rights, because there will be no social security if there's no justice for nature and vice versa. So these are the three pillars. There needs to be a different kind of link between humans and nature, and indigenous people would say that it's about spiritual relationships. As a scientist or economist, it's a bit difficult to understand this kind of spirituality, but I understand the solidarity. But as I said, there's so much to learn from these ideas, from these practices that the Buen Vivir are shaped by. It's not just about copying and find the perfect Buen Vivir and just copy it. We have to create different kind of realities from our territories. We cannot think that there's just one way of Buen Vivir. We have to know that there are many ways of Buen Vivir, many ways of coexistence. Thank you very much. Thank you, Alberto, and thank you for this idea.
And thank you for that interesting debate. There are many different worlds. It's very complex, and it should be complex. So, as you said, there are no models, there are no concepts, but there are ways to go. And that was my thought too. There are so many ideas that bring inspiration, and the topic of Buen Vivir, just as you said, is a practice, an old practice, which was well accepted in the West, as you mentioned. On the other hand, there is some shadows and some negative aspects to it, but it's very inspiring as such. So thank you, Alberto, and welcome Olenka Magallanes Prado. She is going to share her thoughts on Buen Vivir. Olenka is 24 years old. She's from Peru. She is talking from the network for the young people of Buen Vivir, and it's about strengthening life together and strengthening the rights of the people and the environment. So Olenka, it's nice having you here. So you're in another time zone, so thank you very much to you and to the other people from Latin America that were here with us from the very beginning, from this morning on. That was the early morning hours, so maybe that's a part of Buen Vivir. So thank you very much for the presentation, and first I would like to start with mentioning something in South American context that is worth mentioning. We talked about rural areas in Latin America. The situation is difficult also due to the pandemic and the inequality that is a given fact in all countries in Latin America, in my continent, in my region. And that's why I would like to call for your solidarity, especially for Colombia, because in the past days, Colombia took it to the streets, and in order to manifest a life in dignity, there are economic problems in the country, and it's really a bad situation in Colombia, and there was that, what we say, we need to defend our rights, but that should not cost our lives, because there were people that died fighting for their rights. And this is what I want to talk about, but I also want to talk about Buen Vivir. And I want to underpin that what I present here today has something to do with the practices in 10 countries of that region. And also Alberto Acosta touched upon it, and he said that it isn't a single structure, one way to see Buen Vivir. There are more than one Buen Vivir. So the principle adapts to the given conditions, the traditions, the way of life in the different regions. So in this case, Buen Vivir is based on the indigenous life. So that's what I would like to explain in my presentation, because it's a beautiful process involving children, adolescents, adults from all different, from all the 10 different countries of Latin America. They all take part, and it's about exchange, getting to know each other better, and being able to see how we work. This is also bringing about answers for alternatives of development. And Alberto also said it, it's always about economic growth, and economic growth does not reflect whether it's a life in dignity, whether you're happy as a community, as a society, as a person, as such. So, and this is something that is owed to us, that we deserve. So this is what we made in a group. Different firms were working in. So I'd like to present that to you. One of the things we do is appreciating the values of the future generations. It's not only the rights of human beings, but also rights for nature, rights of nature. So you can see it in the different territories in Latin America. That Acosta said in Ecuador, Bolivia, nature is very important. There are rights for Mother Earth. You have to see Mother Earth as a living being, as an entity, and it also has rights, right to live. And we want to strengthen the communities. We do that in a traditional way, and not only in the rural areas, but also in urban areas. And the economic and political view of things should be changed. We as political actors should take part and focus on the people, on well-being, on that the money is a necessity in order to buy things you need, but it's not the most important thing. So this is something that we need to keep in mind. The system that is present right now, strengthening the economy all the time, led to the fact that that nature gets destroyed, and this does not only have an impact on Mother Earth, but also on the health of the other people. Like the pandemic is also coming from nature, from an environmental crisis. The nature well-being is something that has not improved yet, and it only causes more damage to everybody. So another approach is back to nature. going back to the center of life, recognizing that it's important to protect our Mother Earth, how important it is to have healthy food, healthy nutrition. That also means we have to learn or unlearn the all right, there was a problem with the audio. Can you hear me? I'm sorry for that. Well, I just talked about how we are educated and all the resources we have are there for humans to exploit them. So the center of this world means, so it's the spirituality of the communities. This is something you need to strengthen. And fourth proposal or is to have an exchange of knowledge. So what you're feeling, what you're thinking, that you can express all those, that you know something about the traditions, but the knowledge from the past is combined to the knowledge of today, and that things keep changing all the time. And Alberto already mentioned that there is not only one structural form for Buen Vivir and its practices adapt to the context, to the region. It's changing all the time, from time to time. There are social contexts that are changing. So we have to create a Buen Vivir together with nature, also in the cities. That's important. It's a process of decentralization in urban regions. We have to strengthen sustainable, futureable approaches in politics. So they said rural area stands for old way of life. For back in the days, people coming from those communities should move into the cities for a better future. That is what they tell you. This is what you taught, that the cities stand for progress, for a better life. So this is why there is so much migration. Lima is the capital, which is really exists of that migration, because the system said you need to go to the capital for a better life, for a modern life. But everyone in Lima can tell you it's not like that. It's a chaotic city. It's a lie. We're being taught that there is some sort of development, progress, or a life and dignity there, but it wasn't. So also during the pandemic, you can see that families went back to rural areas. And it became obvious that living there was better for them, and that the whole situation could be handled there much better. And that also opened up a new perspective to us. Now we're seeing cities differently. And what we found was that it is possible, and that's what I take a stand for. I'm living in Villa Felador. And in the quarter I live in, and every neighbor will tell you the same story. It is like we all organize ourselves in order to get a real good standard of life. And the motto of our neighborhood is that we do not have everything, but we can do everything. It's about common work, working together. It's not about the individual as such. We simply want to grow, but we want to grow together. Another approach to Buen Vivir is that there is a democracy that allows participation, that you have visibility, that even children can participate, that children have a voice. That's necessary. There is no difference between people, so one person's not worth more than another person, and this is important. Strengthening our way of life, our work together, and our community, and it's about the experiences as a religion in our territories. We have networks for young people, for children in Latin America, and we are really trying to create rights for the environment. It's not rights for children and young people only, but also for Mother Earth. And it's important that children and young people are part of the system. So it's very important that our voice is heard. Also, the spiritual aspect is very important. We can feel that we are connected to our roots, that we have a good development, and that the nature gets a chance to recover again. That is very important. There are regions in Latin America where small villages were built just for planting seeds, the chakras, and that also promotes a sense of community and being united again with Mother Earth. And we have a agricultural university. It's about planting seeds. It's about water, creating access to water, and it's about the spiritual life. It's important to appreciate and see how important water is for humans, for individuals, but also for the whole community, for the animals, for the nature as such, and for being intercultural. It's also important to think about the concept of territories. It's not that I want to be in my territory only, but there are different territories, different cultures, and there can be some exchange. You can be in contact with each other, learn from each other, exchange products and knowledge. This is important in order to maintain, to stay there. And also learning and unlearning is important, because this Western view that is that we are subjected to here in Latin America is not contextualized. It's not adapted to our knowledge. It's not adapted to our way of learning, to our knowledge, to our history. So maybe we have to unlearn a few things, because we have to see that it's not the only truth. There is not only one view. but there are different views of work, education, and we need to create communities in this respect too. In those regions in Latin America, there are alternative rooms for learning. It's about learning to see the view of Mother Earth. It's important to put the culture in the focus, because that is very helpful if you want to have a sustainable thinking, which is focused on the future. And it's about solidarity. This is my last point. It's about urban and rural areas being in solidarity with each other. Many families did not have anything to eat because of the pandemic, and they didn't have the money to buy food. And here we tried to get back into the communities, to come together, help each other as neighbors. And that was very helpful for so many families to overcome the pandemic, because you've been treated over dinner and you help each other, or you pay $1 or $3, whatever you can afford, and you collect the money, and afterwards you can buy some food for, or get some food for the whole community, also for those that have nothing. And also looking at education or environmental education, it's important to look at all the processes in education to adapt them to the regions of Latin America. And this is something we want to do, and what we picked up in our learning spaces all the time with something to do with Buen Vivir. It's common work. It's I'm helping you because you need me, but later I maybe need you. So supporting each other, that is what it's all about, and living or having a good life together in dignity. As I said before, it's important to see Buen Vivir also in an urban surrounding, an urban area, because also in cities we should live life in dignity and not in chaos, because this is what you see when you think of cities in Latin America. You think of buses, a lot of traffic and chaos, and that's how you see the city. But we also witness that there are common spaces in cities for communities, for children, that want to organize maybe going to the river that is going through the city, going to a park in the city. But there are not too many green sites in cities, but there is love for nature and appreciation of nature in cities too. And it's important that you also have something like that, like Buen Vivir in a city, because it's not, people do not forget everything once they move into a city, but they still have the knowledge from their village and their experiences, and they can see it also in the city. They can find it there, and they created their own community, and this is how they combined both things, how they got them together. And also in the pandemic, you could witness that in the city, people were talking about medical herbs, and they helped themselves to get rid of some diseases they had, and it's about sharing the knowledge and, of course, planting our own crops and food. It was important in the pandemic that centers of infection were in the on the markets, so it was you could go shopping and you could contract the virus, and it's important to create spaces where you can grow your own food and put it on a table. That was a great experience for many people, and that brought back hope that there are other ways of life also in the cities. And to come to an end, I'd like to show this sign in the end of my presentation, because young people showed it when they took to the streets. It was in the capital in my country, and there is an important river flowing through the city, and many people that take a walk along that river, they don't know that that's the water that they use in their houses, and that's why there was a project. It was an artist's project, and many children that took water from that river, and they said, would you drink it because it's dirty, polluted water? And people were astonished because they thought, no, I would not drink that water. But that's the same river in that city we do not care about. We pollute that river. And it's so important for us because it gives us water. It's also about looking at the river and being aware and making a connection to that river. Sometimes we just pass by. We do not even recognize that there is a river, that animals are living down there. We do not pay respect. But the river also has a right to be respected. He's coming from the mountains, going through the whole city. And the river's free to run wherever it wants. And all these ecosystems living in the water also have a right to live and live healthy in that river. This is all I wanted to share. I hope it was interesting for you. Thank you. Thank you, Olenka, for that great speech. It was very inspiring. And it fits to what we heard from Alberto. So you gave us the experience, and you gave us a lot of examples and ideas and inspiration, and there are so many stories we can tell and questions we can ask. But what I want to stress is that what we heard, and it's also closely connected to what you said. The question was about when we were in the cities, because what Alberto said is sometimes romanticizing the rural life, but in the cities is not that good. But when we were in a city, good life in a city is a good example, just like Alberto had good examples. So you can also, as Alberto said, have a good life in Cologne, because they say it's good life in Cologne. So thank you, Alberto, and all the other representatives for mentioning that. talking about the situation in Colombia, and thank you for providing us with that information. This is something that is not in the media. But saying that, telling us about this in a true context is something that is very important, because we have to know that this is going on right now in Colombia. So thank you to the both of you, because you also drew the line to the pandemic. So it's very important the way you did it. And that takes me to the questions. The first question is, thank you, Alberto. If I got that right, the central factor is a network that needs to be created, a network for nature, so that rights for nature are obvious. You also said something about that river that was also the same point. So who's talking in favor of nature? Which forum and which scientific forum? So what's the difference? If we should put a price on the destruction of nature. So Alberto, the floor is yours, and then Olenka second. But I want Alberto to answer that question. Okay, so let me begin. I would like to say that I'm really happy about what Olenka said. It was really great, and I can see how important it is to show our solidarity with the people in Colombia. We must be aware of the fact that these conflicts are turning up in our world more often, especially since October 2018. It was Colombia, Peru, Ecuador, trying to get rid of the constitution of, and there are very interesting processes, people enriching themselves in the midst of this pandemic, and it would be great to organize a get-together to show up these connections and how we have to build all anew this, that there is a closer connection between the city and the rural areas that came about in the pandemic. But there are some elements I need to mention. It's learning and unlearning, and learning again is very important. I'm from the academic world, from a traditional world, a very conservative family. I had a lot of problems unlearning myself what I've learned. I can tell you thousands of stories about how I learned all these things new. We know that dialogue on knowledge is very important. It's the core piece, the core concept, because we do not have the same thoughts all the time. That's why we need to exchange our ideas. We need to use Buen Vivir in the cities. The cities are not sustainable at all. You cannot talk about sustainability in cities. We need to rebuild this. The question of water is a very important question. It's a human right. It's not a consumable. We need to deep privatize water. There are so many good examples here in Germany. There was a referendum in Berlin, but resistance is everywhere in the world. So what is a basic right of human people, of humans? So we have to reconsider how we see a community that is full of life, how our relation to nature is. And a friend of mine from Catalonia, he says that we need to create a sense, some better quality of life in the cities and the people living in Germany. You can, my advice is read the texts of an author who tells us all about the concept of the good life. And in order to come to an end, I made good experiences with the group Saal, which is a group of musicians, and I had great experiences with them. We were welcomed in the city. You probably know that city in Germany. This ideology in that city that is mentioned in The Good Life, people think of a good life and how can they create that? How can they overcome these problems? So there is a lot to learn. And Olenka, your presentation was so fantastic because you really nailed it. You really got it coming from the ground up together with Mother Earth, and you used social change to show that. And we are living in a fast world at the moment. It's an accelerated process where a sense of community breaks down. We are destroying the metabolisms of life at the moment. We need to get in contact with Mother Earth, again, finding back to her. There are so many people telling us about the rights of nature, but at home, they demand what promotes the destruction of nature. So rights of the people are the same rights our Mother Nature has. It's not rights of nature. It's not that we have a right to the environment, but it's about the reparations to people that really were affected by the consequences of that destruction in the past. There is no right that respects nature. We have a right to restoration or reanimation. So just in the Constitution of Ecuador, there are many articles talking about rights for nature and human beings. 71, 73, 74 says that plurinationality and pluricultural needs to be respected. Regeneration of their life cycle needs to take place, and that's the fundamentals. Integrations, third. It's important to maintain the cycles of nature. There are different articles, 72 to 74. They are really covering this, these aspects. There are so many things that need to be considered. Who represents nature? It's us. who represent small children. It's also us human beings, or us humans, and it's not authority that does that. It's important to be aware of that. We are giving rights to nature, but in fact, we are entitled by nature because it gives us life. We cannot live without nature. And nature would not need us, human beings. So seeing that from a very egoistic perspective, we need to come together with nature so that our grandchildren, our children can live together with nature. So Olenka, maybe you want to add something? Yes, I also agree with Alberto. I think it's a very important topic. Also comparing the right of nature to the right of human beings, it's important to talk about that. And I perfectly agree with Alberto when it comes to who represents these rights, because many people say, what is the river going to say? Is he going to complain? Is the river going to complain to the authorities? Is it fair to those living close to the river, because they are having that dialogue, because they're feeling that nature, the rivers, the territories are so important. Those are the people raising their voice. And lots of the peoples in Latin America standing up for those rights, for respecting the nature. So this is what I wanted to add. All right, I go to another question, which is a conceptual question. So thank you, first of all, to both of you. Sally Matthews also wants to thank you. And she is talking about Buen Vivir and another concept.
No, disculpa, entiendo, Heike. Mira, yo respondería.
I'm a little bit confused right now, so please understand that, but I'm thinking of I had a similar question in the past, or another representative of the indigenous people. So when we start talking about Buen Vivir, Kavasai, if we cannot get a vision, compare those two, so that's a mistake. Just imagine a shoebox on a table, and we put everything inside. We know about Buen Vivir or Sumak Kavasai, and we think then that box is full, but there is no possibility to go further with the dialogue. Some people say Sumak Kavasai and Buen Vivir are two different things, but I think there should be no debate about that. We should create further options that are coming from indigenous people, and that's what I heard before. Biggest problem is that this box is empty. So there is need for dialogue. We need to build bridges and create a lot of alternatives. Of course, there is a difference between Buen Vivir and Sumak Kavasai. There are many differences, but that's not important. But common things are important. So it's creating a life in dignity for the people. It's not dolce vita for some of us by exploiting the nature and having other people suffer.
I also got a question for Olenka. Do you think that elements of this Buen Vivir should become a part of education? Well, I can give you an example from Peru. There are many different projects and territories in Peru, and we've created processes of intercultural cooperation in the past 5 years. We've already done that, and these processes are but where there are alternative spaces of education as well, where practices of indigenous people, of old communities, and all this influences and is part of um, education that takes place in several regions in Peru. It's called intercultural education. It's actually, you can actually study that when you study, when you want to teach intercultural learning. You can just actually go and study that at the university. There was a experience when I was in a community called Ayacucho, where you could see that it's where actually the communities themselves, the oldest communities, who passed on their knowledge in school as well. And I was able to see how the students, together with the teachers, with their families, went to those territories, learned how to um, cultivate food, how to harvest food. It's a time of exchange, it's a process of learning, of Buen Vivir, with respect, with love as well, and with love for Mother Earth. Thank you very much. Well, there's another topic I'd like to touch on when it comes to children and students. It's a question from Alberto, actually. Judging from your experience, from what you've learned, what's the role of young people, of children, of teenagers when it comes to the rights of nature? Olenka can, of course, answer that as well if she wants to. Olenka already touched on that subject, that education needs to be redefined. We need to think about it in a different way. There should be fundamental principles, for instance, that we don't focus on individualism, but on the society as a whole, that we build on mutual relationships, that we don't think about visions that focus on performance, but on things we have in common. There's a whole list of principles we could write down, and the universities, schools could pass on these things. There's a difference between the list of the West and of those of the communities of the Buen Vivir, the different kind of principles. So we should try and not to compete with each other all the time, just but focus on being and judge society in a very different way. We could learn a lot from indigenous people. We could take on different kind of castes, take on elements that do exist in Europe. Yesterday, I think I mentioned there's Ivan Illich. He's an Austrian pastor, and he wrote about de-schooling, that you no longer pump money into schools and getting more teachers, but you think differently, that education is viewed from a different point of view, to abolish this traditional logic and create into new forms. We will always have conflict. We will never have a complete idyllic world. But just imagine, instead of having a world that just constantly wants new to get new things, new goods, that we have a new focus instead, that we are the focus, not just me without you, but us. That's fundamental. Thank you very much. Olenka, do you want to add something? Yes, I'd like to give a response as well. Alberto already mentioned it in a very clear manner, but I do think it's important here in Latin America that it just has to be crucial for children and teenagers to have a voice and to have a right to a voice. They do protect Mother Earth as well, and in the community, it's important to exchange knowledge. Children and teenagers, they do have knowledge as well. They can contribute to that as well. It often is the case that children suffer the most from from the environment's problems. Children who don't have enough blood because of mining, because of oil, they are contaminated, and these children are simply not registered, not recognized, and governments are doing nothing to change that. Children and teenagers organize themselves. There are many collectives across all of Latin America by children, by teenagers, who deal with or work with and on topics of the environment, who have a voice, who raise their voice. We should be able to hear their voice and what they claim and call for, that should be respected. As it's all about Mother Nature and about the rights of nature. Once again, we've got some more questions and comments.
Voy a volver sobre una pregunta que
I will now get another question that was mentioned at the very beginning. Someone asked about Buen Vivir in Cologne. And the question is, what do you think? How does it, or does European culture identify itself with when we would be able for them to identify with it? Because it is concept that comes from a completely different culture. Maybe think about a more sustainable and more aware culture. You talked about it in your presentation before, but it's a question that popped up once again, and I do think it's pivotal in that context. Yes, there's so much to discuss here, Heike. We already said that you cannot find one model, one recipe, and take from one place and transfer it to another. That would just mean you didn't understand anything. That's exactly what happened when it comes to development. It's about that people said other people have developed, so we have to develop as well. Other people said we want to help you, so we have to accept that help. And that's the problem that we're seeing right now. The problem, the challenge that we have to understand that there's no kind of sustainability, neither in the global north nor in the global south. That we won't find perfect answers. There are many different ways how you can go ahead. Olenka talked about fields. She came up with that example. These kind of fields provided a way to get a new relationship with Mother Earth. I think this kind of field should exist everywhere, in schools as well, so that people can get in contact with water to regain this relationship. There's an edible city as well. That's a city that eats because it has to do with food as well. Food is one of the universal or the most universal languages. People should know how to eat together, how to eat sustainably. There are more options that could be created, very interesting options. Years ago, I used to travel a lot. Currently, that's not, I don't travel at all in the past year. And that's very sad. But also, for instance, so there's a city in Austria where that's kind of the capital of non-traffic. It's in Austria, and about 50% of families do not have a car because public transport is just so fantastic, and they've electric cars that many people use, and people think it is a solution. But to create these cars, you do need resources, mineral resources. And once again, you exploit poor countries, and that has a massive effect. And so new BMW, a huge company, is involved in that. There's a lot of exploitation from lithium, and it's considered sustainability. Everyone keeps using that word pretty much everywhere. It's a very important topic. Every car that enters the city means that people have less freedom in these cities. That's why one should focus on public transport in this case. Because in Europe, there's just so much energy that can be used, wind energy, but they do carry problems with them as well. We move away from fossil fuels, which is good idea, but still with the new energy, we still exploit other people, other countries. The cities in the global north and the south just have to be reconsidered. We need a different kind of logic. And this, the perception of Buen Vivir would be very helpful, how to coexist with nature, how to create communities. It's just people work together on eye level, live together on eye level, and you just can think about mutuality and solidarity. Thank you very much, Alberto. There are more questions about nature, and I'd like to cite something that was mentioned several times today. Food, alimentation is important. Magda from Peru wrote a commentary. It's really a challenge to understand how, when you grow up entirely differently, or have a different type of education, you don't necessarily understand how people receive nature or how other aspects are received. Some other rights that in Summa Causa you talk about eating well, animikoi. It's not just about eating healthy, it's about food that's connected to you. This is a comment that Martha made. And we have many other questions. Unfortunately, I cannot host them all. We will just do it the way we did before. The questions that weren't responded, we keep them in the chat, we write it down, and then answer them later on. One question that wasn't answered yet, but it's very important, is a question about the topic of Colombia, what's happening in Colombia right now. So the question is, how deal with when we're in phases or times of oppression and violence, and how to create a dialogue when people in the government how to start talking to them when it's easier for them to kill you instead of listening to you. That's a massive question, and we really looking forward to the answers. I think that's a question for Olenka, because I just want to get some inspiration from what she says. Well, that's very complex. It's a very interesting question. It has a lot to do with governments, with governments that we do choose who's in power. And education has to do with that. Social topics are important. When it comes to demonstrations, for example, there were many demonstrations in Latin America, and these demonstrations were well organized. They were organized by students, youth groups, parents. There was a lot of organization by young people as well, by the community in general. We can see that a community who has strength to get themselves organized and has beliefs in, has faith in society, and make sure that rights are protected. In Latin America, last demonstrations were very peaceful. This demonstration became very cultural in the past few years. The culture was present in all these demonstrations. It's something that we have to highlight. Our way of life has changed, our identity, our culture is present in these kind of demonstrations. Since last year, when we started to talk about the progress in Peru, we talk about police reform and militia or police. They are destructed in a way that they have a negative answer, or they behave negatively if there's any kind of manifestation, if there's any kind of demonstration. In Latin America, the police was there, right there. They were present. They used violence, despite the fact that police should be here to protect society, not to oppress it. You see that something's going wrong when police have to take care of you. You're supposed to protect you, and you show how you just teach police to oppress. So something's just going wrong. Or that we can protect each other from the regime. That's very important as well. Our perspective. I think we should change something when it comes to Buen Vivir. Just many protests in Latin America, and it's important. The current system, or the systems that prevail in Latin America, even with economics to corruption, these are systems that do not allow for dialogues for implementing Buen Vivir. They just consider this is a way of life or a way of governing.
Formidable, muy oportuna. Ya Olenka nos da algunas pistas.
That's a very important question, and it shows us how we can implement these ways of life. So we could bring up some reflections that the different types of when we wear, those different experiences, these practices, these visions were present in indigenous peoples over more than hundreds of years. So without the exclusion of colonization, and these communities resisted, they still existed, and this was something that was normal to them. We see how the communities reorganized during the pandemic, found new answers, and also the protests that you can see in almost all the countries in Latin America, also in Brazil, we see a lot of bad things going on. And that's a form of saying no to violence, to a patriarch system, which kept us in shackles, which it's oftentimes it is like people do not have access to a to work to good life. So also during the pandemic, that's why we need governments that also have visions like these, or at least support them. Because if we do not have these governments, then the answer is that the common organization and these alternatives are become more and more important and have to stand up for those rights. And that's a basic fact. And I see there are so many questions coming in, but just let me tell you a little story in my campaign for something. I was in Guayaquil in a very interesting part of the city, which was very popular, and candidates need to hold speeches, and they talking and say some more or less intelligent things. And I was talking, and the wife said, "You have great ideas. You're an economist, you're very interesting," but this wife also said, "Do not come to my part of town and tell me what I have to do here, because if you come here and we talk about this, we can find solutions." So this was a great discussion. It's not coming from the government. We need to start in the communities. We need to start from the bottom. So we cannot even, all the problems can be solved in the problems in the communities. We can find great alternatives in all fields. The more community we have, the more people feel like they belong to something. The more interaction we have, the more we can create a life in dignity. And that's a great news for me. There is no recipe coming from the top down. There is no enlightenment from the top. We need to find our way from the bottom. And there are so many ways that already do exist. We only need to identify those ways, those paths. But we need to make sure that we do not take the path that goes directly into hell. Thank you very much, Alberto. I think with what you said, this block comes to an end. There are so many questions. Unfortunately, I cannot ask them all. So many great words, and I would like to say some of the comments that I read that I really found were really great. We had some technical issues. Sorry for that. And now time is running out, but there was a question on spirituality. And we've seen a video of children telling us what Buen Vivir means to them, what the dance means, what the rituals mean, what Pachamama means. That dancing is some form of prayer. It's about simply being present, and it's a great question that I would like to ask at the end. So it was one of the first questions, but those words were so moving to me. So about steps opening up ways. There was another question on the rights of nature, on the concepts, questions on the difference or the things Buen Vivir and Ubuntu and Christian beliefs have in common. So bringing all that together, what are the common things of these concepts? And I think it also has to do with these paths ways that I talked about. We need to maintain a dialogue. So it was very inspiring from both of you. And hopefully we can continue this discussion at a later point in time. So thank you very much to the both of you.